I'm sure it's easy to change, but this is live.
Are you streaming?
Yeah. Just turn the volume on.
Thanksgiving's like
For now, I'll go get the power part.
They're playing I don't know what it's oh, yeah. Do you prefer the lights this way or this way?
I think a little similar.
Like that? All right, perfect. Okay. All right, Tim, are we still going to be able to see those folks through the webcast? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Okay. So welcome everybody, and welcome to everybody on the internet as well, because we have a number of people. Maybe I should move over here so that those folks can see me while I'm talking. This is the first in our local governance seminar series for 2014-15. We've got about 6 or 7 of these coming up, including 2 more this fall. And so thank you to everybody for being here. Just before I forget, our next one of these is actually right at the end of October. October 28th, we've got Andy Sankton. So that's just looking forward. But right now, I'm really happy to have 3 folks from the City of London here. Some of you may already know Kate Graham. And we've also got Rosanna Wilcox and Matt Daley. I asked them how do they like to be introduced. They said, oh, just names. So I'm going to let them give other context. But they've all worked with and are familiar with some of the opportunities and challenges that have been arising with the new technology that allows us to process and use big data in municipalities. This is what they're going to be talking about. So please welcome them. And let's go ahead.
Martin, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. So I think what we'll start with is a day in the life of an average citizen here in the City of London. So if you're like me, your smartphone is your alarm. So your smartphone goes off, you wake up. So where did the hydro come from to power that smartphone? It of course came from London Hydro. There's of course all sorts of data that's being produced and collected as it relates to that hydro that's powering that alarm or that smartphone. All right, I wake up, my feet hit the ground. I'm groggy, I'm looking around. The building that's there, the neighborhood that's there, the planning department of the City of London was involved. Data associated with how that neighborhood was planned. The building department was involved with how the structure of my home exists. All sorts of data involved there. I walk over to the shower, I turn on the water. Water comes on, water pressure comes out, all those elements are also associated with data and are all related to the City of London. Hop in my car, start driving on the roads, or I hop on the LTC when it comes to transit. All sorts of data, all in the context of municipalities and all related to our daily lives. So what we can see is we've got all sorts of data that's being collected from all these different sources. And it impacts all of our daily lives, which takes us to a bit of a conversation around big data. I'm going to read these definitions. Big data is a phenomenon defined by the rapid acceleration and the expanding volume of high-velocity, complex, and diverse types of data. It represents both a challenge, in ranking, in making sense, rather, of the data available to government and how an opportunity for government agencies that seek to exploit it to enhance the business of government. A bit of a mouthful for anyone. Just me reading it, I think I mixed it up twice. So what we have here is a very big and sort of cumbersome definition. We also have all sorts of competing definitions of big data. It seems that sometimes big data is just used to sort of describe better analytics or new analysis of the data set. So what the heck is this big data thing? So we started investigating, and I read one quote that said, big data is anything bigger than the sort of maximum elements of an Excel spreadsheet. Well, that didn't sound right to me. I also read one, and this is a little vulgar, so I acknowledge it before I start. This is David Arley. He said, big data is like teenage hanky-panky. Everyone talks about it. No one knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it. So what we have is a bit of a mystery here around big data, which is acknowledged in what exactly is it. We move into 4 key characteristics. Now there's even argument about these V's. Sometimes there's 3 V's, sometimes there's 4 V's, sometimes there's more V's. So for the purpose of our discussion here, I think we're going to focus on these 3 V's. When we look at volume, what we're talking about here is the sheer amount of data that's ingested, analyzed, and managed to make decisions. Something that will touch every one of you is when you buy something online. Customer transactions create a huge amount of data. So if I buy a book on Chapters or Amazon, you know, that there's a data trail of all those actions for all of our consumer purchases. And what we see from that is that little thing beneath there that says suggested reads or suggested products. So we've got this huge volume of data being used in those different ways. If we look to the City of London, the City of London's storage currently is 400 terabytes of information. And to put that in context, that's about 26 times the size of all the printed works in the US Library of Congress. That's just the City of London's data. So we can see there's a volume there, both in the City of London and in the context that we're discussing. Moving over to variety. This is the rise of information coming from news sources. There's a rule of thumb that says around 15%, pardon me, I'm on the weather, guys, so bear with me. There's a rule of thumb that says about 15% of the data is structured data. So think rows and columns. The other 85% is unstructured data. It comes in the form of, communication, prose heavy, video, audio, all those different elements. So there's a rule of thumb there. But what we're seeing is there's new opportunities to use this variety of data in different ways. And at the City of London, we've got about 100 different municipal services. And within those 100 municipal services, we've got 100 to some degree separate IT needs. We've got 100 separate service needs. So we've got all these different data sources hitting us at the City of London, where there's opportunity both within those services, but also across those services and those data sets. The third V that we're going to discuss is veracity. And this is really about the quality of the received data. Now, when I was doing my MPA project with Dr. Young, we were doing some data-heavy stuff. And let me tell you, he taught me about data veracity. So this is something that is an absolute hurdle in the big data situation and an essential part, an essential characteristic of big data. When we look to velocity, what velocity is all about is how fast the data is being produced and changed, and the speed with which the data needs to be received, understood, and processed, potentially into management decisions. A great example of this that everybody can relate to are smartphones. Our smartphones are constantly keeping tabs on us, so to speak. So there's this constant exchange of high velocity data as it relates to where we're going, what we're doing on our smartphones, and those other elements. A nice example of the City of London is real-time security threat monitoring. So at the City of London, we do real-time security threat monitoring on our firewalls. This is a snapshot of where the threats come from in the span of about 5 days at the City of London with people attacking the City of London's firewalls. Turning our attention to some local government examples. Los Angeles was the first city to synchronize all of its traffic lights. This project started many years ago in the 1984 Los Angeles Games, where they started changing the traffic flow patterns to support people moving to different events and so forth. And recently, they have now finished this project where they have fully synchronized traffic lights. What this allows users to do is intelligently alter traffic flows based on hiccups or accidents or issues that occur. And the result, a California State Senate report indicated that travel speed is up 16% and travel time is down 12%. And they're attributing that to the synchronized traffic lights. We also see an interesting project in Dublin, Ireland. And what Dublin is doing is it's using real-time data streaming and traffic information. So what they're using is road sensors, video cameras, GPS updates on buses to see exactly how the traffic patterns are working and what changes they need to make to reroute or alter based on those situations. So what we see is something very interesting here, going back to our 4 Bs, we see, particularly when it comes to transport, we see very interesting elements around velocity. It's been said that data velocity in transport and traffic, 15-minute-old data it's ancient. This isn't going to help us, forecast or alter patterns or anything like that in any way. So what we see is when it comes to the traffic examples in both Los Angeles and Ireland, we see great opportunity, but we also see the importance of that data velocity. Let's talk about snow. Who was here for the winter of 2013, 2014? That was a fun one, wasn't it, guys? I know I spent a lot of time shoveling on my driveway. So when it comes to where's my plow, this can be something as simple as a GIS related application, or it can be something as interesting as what Hokkaido University is doing in Japan. And what Hokkaido University is doing in Japan is they're looking at how to optimize the use of their snowplows and their operations. And they're taking into consideration meteorological data, road condition data, bus, taxi, and snowplow data in a similar way like we saw in Los Angeles and in Ireland. They're taking into consideration social media information, and they're also taking into consideration, of course, past records and historical flows of traffic. What's interesting about this one is you can see back to those 4 V's. You can see it's got the velocity around the traffic patterns. It's got the variety by including some of those social media elements, people saying, oh, I'm snowed in, and etc., so they can start tracking and seeing and blending all these things. And you see variety in there as well. Moving to some of the challenges associated with these things. Not every problem needs a whole bunch of data thrown at it, and not every problem isn't wise from a cost-benefit perspective to do this. So we have to be careful how we engage on some of these things, particularly in public service. So if we look at historical data collection issues, what kind of data do we have? I just mentioned we have 400 terabytes of data. How much of that is good data that can support good analytics, that can support better management decision and better problem solving? So there's some issues around how this data has been collected historically. Data quality. I think we've all at some point in our lives thought, okay, I've got this great research or management problem. I think I've got the perfect data set coming, and the data set's a disaster. And you're looking at it going, this is going to take 6 months just to get anything out of it. Is this worth it? So data quality is another significant hurdle that we have to work with. Privacy and security. It seems like weekly or monthly, we're hearing about a significant security issue as it relates to people's data. JP Morgan Chase comes right off the top of my head. I think it was 76 million households were potentially compromised. So when it comes to data and security, we have to be vigilant, and it is a significant challenge. Privacy is another interesting one. I think I'll leave most of this to the philosophers in the room, but privacy is interesting in that on one hand, when I look out into the environment, I see a large group of people very happy to share the most intimate details of their life to whomever wants to consume that information. On the other hand, I see people using a software like TOR, which is really a way of ensuring that other people can track what you're doing and where you're going, your location or where you're going online. So there seems to be a very interesting polarity there, which is of course a problem in what we're doing and is challenging. When it comes to the knowledge and skills gap, I'm going to put myself out there today to this group, and I'm going to say that I think that a good understanding of how to collect representative data, how to analyze data, and very importantly, how to translate that into public administration, business decision, and management decision making is one of the most important skills that public servants and bureaucrats will need in the years to come. And I would argue they need it right now. I'll say it right now, I'm not good enough at that. So I'll put myself out there that we have a knowledge and skills gap there, and Rosanna is going to touch a little bit more on that in a minute. Lastly, there is a traditional history of experience-based decision making. Sometimes when people have been making a decision in a certain way and they believe it to be an accepted truth, and they're faced with new data, sometimes folks aren't as receptive to that change. So there is also a hurdle around that. In addition to that, we see hurdles around IT infrastructure. We see hurdles around software infrastructure and the interest in putting enough money into that software that these things can actually be done the way they should. We also see problems with integration. Although we have all the 100 services and all those data sets, and that sounds really good, we inherently have a data integration and system integration issue associated with that, which needs to be addressed. Lastly, there are also data governance issues, and that provides the group with a little bit of an overview on the different challenges that are impacting municipal government as it relates to big data. At this point, I'd like to introduce Rosanna Wilcox to speak to some specific elements that are occurring in the city of London. Thank you.
So what are we doing? So I think Matt's done a great job in setting the context in terms of there are lots of challenges associated with big data, whether it's general understanding of it, what do we do with it, how do we approach it, and it is relatively new for most municipalities. So I'm going to take you through a few examples of what we're doing and some opportunities, and actually Kate and I will walk you through both of those. So there's a real opportunity. Data is important, and there's an opportunity to leverage it to improve how we serve customers. To kind of set the context for that, each and every day, the City of London has thousands of interactions. What that is, we're helping a customer register for a program, one of our spectrum programs. Say it's a parent-taught arts and crafts class, or it is that's taking place at our one of our community facilities. We have probably 70 counters in the city where we have a facility and a presence. That could be, the interaction could be us processing an application for a business license, let's say for a hair salon, or license of 30 businesses. It could be us picking up the recycling you put out at the end of your driveway. Or it's responding to a question someone had put in the application. I've seen one of our fabulous signs that says possible land use change, and they're calling to ask, what the heck does that sign mean? Right? So, and again, adding more context to that, we receive incoming calls anywhere from about 500,000 to 750,000 calls every year. Questions vary, the type of calls, interactions, whether it's a tier 1 that requires a simple response, or we're doing some type of a tier 2 intake. As well, our website, london.ca, gets about 2 million visits in a year. And this is not to mention the thousands of interactions that are taking place at all of those counters. So each and every one of these interactions is an opportunity not only to collect data, but to provide a great customer experience. And customer experience is very important to us. In fact, it's one of our top priorities at the City of London. In 2012, the City Council approved an implementation plan called Service London Plan, which is really at its heart about changing the way we think about service and putting a focus on a great customer experience. And really thinking about designing service around the wants and needs of residents and those folks using our services. We want to ensure that we are providing service that's simple, it's seamless, it's personalized, and it's accountable. And in order to do that in a meaningful way and start to change the way we think about service and how we deliver those services, we need data to do it. We want to make data-driven decisions. So we have a lot of data currently, and I think as Matt alluded to, it tends to be collected in very disparate modes. So we have these 100 distinct businesses, and I'll give a few examples of those. In each area tends to have their own customers. They collect the data in their own way, in their own system, and we have different identifiers for how they think about those customers. So a key element of this Service London plan is the acquisition of a customer relationship management tool. So if you're not familiar with that, it's really a tool the private sector uses widely and has been doing so for decades. It's a tool that manages customers and customer interactions. And what's exciting about it is it not only helps us to track and call in, and you've got a question about a pothole, you can enter that service request. It has a workflow that you build into it that can assign that to a particular supervisor that goes out, does that pothole, and enters closes the loop on that, sense of accountable service. It more exciting the corporate system. One place to collect the data. It's moving towards that one source of truth for information on our customers. So it provides us, as I said, a great opportunity to think about how we need to change and improve how we serve our customers. And I think we fully admit that we lack the skills. There is definitely a gap in skills around who we typically hire. We aren't always looking for someone who analyze and take huge data sets and make sense of it. We've got consistent lines of business and kind of a traditional method of thinking of how we deliver those services. So a second opportunity that we're looking at is exploring a partnership with Western, and we've been working with the Boston Computer Science Department to try and think through, okay, you have the expertise, we've got lots of data, let's work together and think through how we can tackle the problem. So there's staff training opportunities there for us to begin to learn more about basic concepts of big data, and how we do that, to start to experiment with our own data. There's all kinds of data around water, and how usage, the patterns of what people use, how to conserve, all of those things. So starting to, what do you get when you combine that with other data sets like hydro usage, heat efficiency in houses, all of those pieces. So it's an exciting opportunity. And again, I think it's about working collaboratively between ourselves and with the expertise that you've brought in State University. But it's a great opportunity for us, and the start of hopefully a brand new path of how we start to really tackle these problems. I'm going to turn it over to Kate, who's going to walk you through some other opportunities that we're looking at.
So Matt started this presentation by talking about kind of the day-to-day stuff that we all do every day, and the fact that those day-to-day behaviors, those activities, generate a lot of data. So I mentioned Matt Felberg, he's got lots of data on your water use. Why would we be interested in that data? We're interested in that data because it tells us about what areas of the city are conserving. It tells us about general patterns towards conservation. When we combine his data set with information from hydro or other areas, we can get a sense of broad trends going on in the community, about the way the citizens are behaving, what kinds of needs and expectations they have from the city. So one of the real opportunities with big data in our view is that it's a chance to learn about our community in a more empirically based way. So that's a big opportunity that we've talked a lot about. But one of the points we thought was important to make today is that everything we've talked about so far is inside of city halls, inside the corporations of the City of London. You know, the ways that we're using data to make decisions and better serve customers, better manage. But there's a lot of data about our customers that is outside of the city. And there's also an enormous amount of capacity to engage with data and read insights from data that's also outside of the city. And if we step back for a minute and think about in London, those of you who are in this community, we've had a lot of innovations in London in the tech space that have not come from inside City Hall. So to give you an example, London was one of the first cities in Canada to have an open data policy. So way before anybody was even talking about it. And it was not because City Hall thought it was a great idea, although we did. It was because there were a group of citizens that sat down with a councillor and they demanded it, to be honest with you. They made a really good case for why the city should open up data sets, post them online, and citizens could then use them. And as a result, we were one of the first cities in Canada to have a policy to make the data available. We were also one of the first cities to have a variety of apps around transit and garbage and things like that. And again, those did not come from inside City Hall. Those were citizens who saw value. In the case of the transit app, it was built by a student who's now gone on to do great things in the US, but he was not given the data in an accessible format. He had to manually scrape it off of hundreds of PDF documents about all of the bus routes and the times and locations where they were. So there's been a ton of innovation in London that's happened outside of City Hall, but it can be incredibly useful to build insights about citizens. So I wanted to give a topical example, and there's so many examples of things going on outside of City Hall that actually are really, really useful to help inform the work that we do with the city. And one of the most, obviously, I'm sure most of you heard, we've got an election going on right now. There's been an enormous amount of citizen-led activity around this election. I'm not sure if anyone signed up for the 30 Days to Vote challenge. It's like a fitness challenge where you get a little email every day about things to do to get ready for the election. We have citizens who have, on a voluntary basis, are live streaming all of the debates that are happening leading up to Election Day. There's been a huge amount of activity that is citizen-led, it's outside of City Hall, but it furthers the work that we generally think of as being city work. So I wanted to point to one specific example. I just stumbled upon this fairly recently, but I think it's really great. And it's two students. They just graduated from Western, named Brian and Gabe, and they were interested in tweets about the election. And so they set up, some of you may, if you're Twitter users, you may have followed one in Votes Archive, they set up a mechanism to essentially take account of every single tweet that's generated about the election. So over the last 6 weeks, they have logged 20,000 tweets from about 3,700 users, and they're able to produce all kinds of interesting information. And it's not, for those of you who maybe more or less familiar with this, it's not just the content of the tweet, but there's all kinds of other information that you can get about individual tweets. You can get information about the users, how the users are connected to each other. You can do sentiment analysis, you can theme a topic and see how positively or negatively people are talking about an issue or a candidate. You can map the geography of where they're talking about these things. So they're building a huge database, essentially of several weeks of public conversation about the election, and they're doing interesting things with it. So I had a phone call with Gabe and Brian yesterday just to make sure it was okay with them to talk about their work today, and they were fine with it. And they sent me a couple of updated diagrams that they've been able to produce, again, just based on information that was already out there, but it provides a lot of insight. So here's an example. Here's a map of the 30, I believe it's about 3,700, 3,800 individual Twitter users who have engaged in a conversation about this election during the last 6 weeks. And what's really interesting here, in my view anyway, is some of this is the way it's presented, but it also shows that there is a large community that is tightly connected to them. These users have a lot of interactions, they follow each other, they retweet each other, and so on. But there's also a subgroup within that that's very actively and even more tightly connected. So again, it gives us kind of an interesting view of who this actively engaged group is in London that's participating in the dialogue. They're also producing stats on who it is that's leading this discussion. And so they can map things, they produce information about who are the heavy influencers, who are the people that are tweeting a lot, who are having a lot of retweets. You can calculate things like influence from this information. So again, it gives us a bit of a map of who are those thought leaders in the community that are driving this dialogue. One other interesting thing, and they did post this on their, they have a Twitter handle where they're using to post on this information, but they've been mapping kind of the frequency of discussion and showing that it's actually tapering off. And we had an interesting discussion on the phone yesterday about, voters getting tired. What will it take to kind of bring that back up for that final push? So again, this is an example of big data. It's data that's out there that lots, foreseeably anyone, if they had the skills, would be able to use it. But they're able to introduce these things that allow us to gain insights about citizens, about people's interests and what's going on in politics. It can give us a sense about what the dialogue is out there. If we wanted to collect this kind of information in a traditional sense, we could spend a lot of money, we could hire a survey company, the information would be late in a small sample. It's not representative, there are biases in the group, but it gives us essentially free and immediately current information about what's going on. So it's very useful, and it's something, again, that's one of those kind of potentials of big data that's happening outside of City Hall, but is certainly helpful inside City Hall we're paying attention to. The final big opportunity that we wanted to bring forward today is that we do a lot of planning work, good and sometimes criticized for doing too many plans, but we've got a lot of big planning activities that happen in the city. So we're heading into a new council, we'll be building a new strategic plan. We've got master plans around most of our kind of large service areas, transportation master plan, parks and rec master plan, water, et cetera, And then we've also just in the final stages of our official plan, the London plan process, which the number I heard yesterday was for 20,000 London people having involved in some way. So we've got all these large-scale planning processes going on, and the opportunity here is to start to think about data as being one of the key drivers of these plans for how we make decisions, for what kinds of strategies we're identifying in those plans, and the ways that we can implement them. And if you were to look at each of these documents, I think that you would see a relatively recent shift where big data or something connected to it shows up in all of these plans, and it hasn't before ever in history, to be truthful. So the most well-known example of the big planning exercise is, of course, the London plan. And becoming a smart city is something that features very strongly in this plan. And part of the reason for that, I think, our planners who did this work would tell you, is because this is something that we were hearing from the community. This matters to them. There's a lot of specific strategies around London being a smart city, and what that means, which are captured here, but you can go on londonplan.ca and read more about it. But again, you're seeing that we're getting a general sense that this is something that's really important for the future of the city, the future of how we run the city and plan the city. And so you're going to see this integrated into a lot of activities we have going on. So our next steps, as Matt said, the joke at the beginning is big data is something that you can't go to a local government conference and hear somebody talking about big data. I don't know that there are a lot of people who or a lot of organizations that truly leverage the full potential, but there's at least an awareness that we need to continue to experiment. We need to take this data, find insights where we can, and use it to help us do the work that we do. And again, it can probably help us to address some of our most serious service delivery challenges that we face and using actionable information, which is really useful. And the other theme that we hope came through today is that we don't think that this is something that should happen within City Hall. A lot of capacity in the community, a lot of capacity within other institutions, Western, Fanshawe, and otherwise, and we need to keep building those partnerships and those connections so that they can help us inform the work that we do, even if we're not necessarily doing it. So with that, we would wrap up, and thanks for your attention. If anybody has questions, I'm sure you'll ask me.
Thank you. So, do we have any questions? No? Let's find out from these folks. The question is, I believe, where we can download open data sets from London, or how those are accessible.
Yeah, we have 60, roughly 60 data sets. I can't tell you the URL off the top of my head, of course, but I'm happy to collect your email and forward it to you. You can also just put it to Google City of London data sets, and I have a strong feeling that will be within the first page.
I have a sort of question that's somewhat related to this as well. I'm just wondering, who in London, or is there somebody in the city now who at the corporate level is kind of taking ownership of this issue and going, what are the big data opportunities, and what are the challenges, what can we be doing, how can we combine data sets? Is there some corporate capacity at this level, or is it more of a decentralized process right now?
I would say that there is a corporate, an informal corporate drive to do this. And I would say that you're looking at 3 people that are doing that. In the last 10 years of working in a municipality, I have found that the big bang approach isn't necessarily the best approach. It's risky, it's usually high cost, and it's not palatable to our political masters. So oftentimes, particularly in a situation like this, it's wise to have some test cases, to build some confidence and to build some credibility, and then move forward into the more corporate sphere. So that's certainly what I would say is the approach right now. We're building those pilots. We've got resources for those pilots, and then we'll move into something more bigger bang. That being said, the smart cities element of the official plan, to the best of my knowledge, no other official plan has a smart cities element in it. And that, of course, from a planning perspective, lays a beautiful path for us to continue to leverage those opportunities, while at the same time building these smaller test cases to move forward.
And just if I can add to that, so Matt runs all things technology in the city, but I think it would be a shame in some ways to think of this as just being a technology problem. Technology enables us to use information and decisions for how we run our services and how we serve the public, how we understand the public. So there isn't really a neat spot that it fits within the organization. I think instead we'd like to make this be kind of an expectation on every manager. So if you run a service and you have data, you need to be interested in what insight comes out of that data, and you need to be interested in thinking about who else has data that when put together, of course, would help you do your job a little bit better. So instead of having it kind of be institutionalized in one office, I think going forward, it should be like we talked about. Every manager is expected to know enough about finance, they're expected to know enough about politics, they're expected to know a variety of capacities, and I think this needs to be added to the list.
I think just to add that as well, with the service level example, we're thinking about customers' feelings, right? And starting to take a different lens on that. So it's a corporate initiative. We want to improve the experience of our customers, improve access to information services at the city. So we start to, our CRM provides a really unique opportunity right now in terms of how we build that and to work actively with customers science outside of it to think, okay, let's build it for the future so that it's, we're setting the parameters, it's going to collect information and start rolling that out so that we can do something with it in the future. We're looking at, a good example, improving access to information and service at our counters. It's not as easy as throwing a dart in a dartboard and saying, okay, well, that center seems to have been volume in this one, and that covers up the quadrants. I think that's a really easy solution to go to, and an easy traditional way of thinking about, okay, that makes sense, equal access. But we're starting to dig through that and say, okay, use this as a test case. How do we start to use the intelligence we have to say, okay, here's what we know about that community, here's how they like to access service, and maybe that's where your services is. It may be the same across all areas of our city, but it may be different. So, trying to this massive the notion of Big Bang. Instead, let's do it in a test case. Let's run with it and try and roll it out.
I don't know if I'll spit this question out, and I feel because my technology knowledge isn't great, but there's obviously a lot of different databases at the city. So there's your golf course database, there's your water, all the different entries for that for various people. How do you make all of those databases talk together and feed into sort of a comprehensive approach to big data? And I mean, from my understanding, maybe in the early days of creating data synchronization at City Hall, there were a lot of individual links between the different databases. So I guess the question is, how do you make them talk together?
That is a wonderful question, and it's one that I don't have a full answer to. We have 400 databases at the City of London, and we have some in SQL, we have some in Oracle, so we have platform differences. What we have to look to your question is, within those 400 databases, from a business perspective, we got to do a little cart and horse here. So from a business perspective, if they're looking to integrate these elements and compare across databases, where is there a business reason to do so? Where is there potential gains? Then we look at the IT infrastructure and the database infrastructure and say, okay, are those possible? And we have to marry some of these up because there is some of those challenges right now. So I don't have a silver bullet for you. I don't think there is a silver bullet. I think that this harkens back to 100 different services with 100 different needs. Folks are going to be resistant to changing their primary service delivery system because somebody wants to integrate into a database. So we have to look at better work around integration, but we do have to fundamentally overcome those challenges. Which is a very good question.
I think part of the struggle too is, as Matt says, we've got different identifiers in each of those databases. So in some services, you might have as your address. In others, Center for Spectrum Partners, you have family codes, you have a family unit. If you're in Matt's area, it's based on your address as well.
I was going to give an example. So we did a lot of data scrubbing with a lot of the water data. It's related to a meter number, but that's related to an address. And that address doesn't always match with the city's planning master address. So we ended up going through a huge process probably about 10 years ago. Where we struck a lot of that information. We actually had 10,000 errors. So at the time we were able to clean that up, and now we're down to about 200 every time we put the sets together. We do it graphically, so we use a GIS system where we take the two data sets and put them together, and then you can really start, you can map things, and you can look at things in a picture. It's a lot easier to resolve information.
I think part of the challenge of doing this, it does raise a lot of the larger questions around, it's pretty big brothering. Kate brings how much garbage I put out, how much water I use when I go on vacation, how late I stay up at night based on my electricity. We have the data where we really could track literally to the individual level all of your behaviors. And there may be, as Matt said, a business reason to do that. It might help us to make decisions, but there's some bigger questions around privacy that I don't know that we've totally grappled with it. So that's one of the barriers to doing it.
I was going to ask you, looking at your data, looks at how we the avenues that are using them so far. And dealing with some of that individual steps of the accounts and things like that, where you are getting into what is KPI.
I would say that we're definitely not to the level where we're checking what things do.
Yeah, no, we're not.
So to your question, Matt, when it comes to some of the privacy elements, we're certainly working closely with, with the legal department within the city of London. We'd be working closely with our privacy commissioner, Jim Purser, as well on these elements, ensuring that we meet those guidelines, while also those decisions, when it comes to sort of big, very serious decisions on privacy and those elements, would be taken up to the senior leadership team of the City of London to have a formal policy from that. At this point, we are really in the data collection, not specifically identifiable to individuals, not addressing what kids do at night and those sort of elements.
Yeah, I was going to say all the data sets that are on there right now, they're all general. That's what we're waiting for is parking things like that. So no water data, nobody has any idea how much anybody uses. Could be asked for.
And those individual identifiers could be asked for. And I believe that is a significant discussion to be had at the highest table at the city level. Absolutely.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, or follow on that, it seems to me that in many ways at least as big a privacy concern as what you do with the data is what other people might do with the data, right? And it's kind of a different set of concerns in a way, because once data is released out into the community, you have no idea what other folks might be able to combine it with and how they might be able to use it. So was that an issue, or is it going to be an issue in relation to London's open data policy?
I think that it has to be. I don't think.
Like, does it have to restrict what data? I mean, you might want to have an open data policy, but can you really be completely open while assuring that the data isn't, while minimizing the risk that the data is going to be misused by some third parties?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, Mark. I don't know where that line is. And I think that there will be smarter people than I that sort of say this is where we're comfortable with this line being. But I don't think there's an easy answer around that because we don't know what, people could take over data set from somewhere else and compare it to this and come up with potentially some nefarious things. So I'm not sure where that line is, but we are definitely dedicated to open data, certainly within the confines of being aware of such privacy and security issues.
I think it just kind of reinforces kind of the complexity of the issues. The world of big data and these colleagues are often criticized, right? But it's not a simple thing. It's not cut and dry around. Well, of course, it's all open. I think there's a philosophy behind there's something there. There's a way that data can be used to improve service delivery, right? Doing all the complexities on top of that in terms of what we collect and use that data and how others use it.
Yeah, just in some ways at a philosophical level, I don't know that there's really anything new. Like, information has been open in government for a very long time. And the public has had a right to expect access to information that they pay for and procured for a very long time. The difference now is that there's so much of it. It's in formats that people can produce unbelievable graphs with literally a click. It's amazing that within a generation we can track all kinds of things that people are doing every day, which we have that information exchange in formats that you couldn't possibly make sense of. So in some ways, there hasn't really been a philosophical change, but because of this, because of the kind of the 4 V's, it produces now these interesting challenges for what to do with all the time.
Bob?
Yeah, could you say a bit more about the customer relationship management tool? Have you got the go-ahead to buy this?
Yeah, actually, we just we just finished up our hospital process, so we got the approval for the tool itself was part of the service line implementation plan that we approved in 2012, and so we going with Microsoft Dynamics CRM, Microsoft Shop, there are lots of reasons to go with Microsoft. Their acceptance, etc. in-house. It's a great tool. So we have implementation starting to help us get through that and understand.
How many people will have to change their behavior to start to use this stuff?
Quite a few. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a corporate rollout, but again, the approach that Big Bang doesn't work. You're not rolling it out and saying, okay, snap your fingers and by January 1, our whole corporation's going to be doing a small phase approach. And from that, there's a bit of a learning curve, and we also want to build a system so that it works. So we're doing a small phase. Some of the folks who manage calls and requests so just public works type pieces. And see, they're probably our biggest fish in terms of requests for service that come in. So start to really work and shape the system around that, and then just slow and phase forward.
Yeah, so I mean, you guys have all kind of touched on my question a bit, I guess, just in terms of how this is all sort of being rolled out kind of incrementally. But I guess I'm just kind of curious, maybe from, I guess, a public administration standpoint, kind of what kind of tensions maybe arise, when in kind of attempting to try to mainstream some of this stuff, and maybe, how those, we see this in other areas as well, like, in hockey right now, right, they're trying to bring in analytics, and you have these old grizzled GMs who say, this stuff is no good. People have to know about hockey before they know about stats. So I'm wondering, if those same kind of dynamics exist within sort of the corporation. Like, we have a grizzled snowplow operator who remembers the storm from 1975, and if you're telling him to do something different than what worked before, kind of where the balance maybe will fall in terms of using this data, but then also maybe relying on people's experience.
I'll take that. It's an excellent question. And to continue with the sports analogy, Moneyball is, albeit somewhat sensationalized, but a very interesting movie. I think that the question, I don't know if it's the answer to the question, but the next steps on the question are absolutely there will be cultural hurdles around that. Experience-based decision making is very dominant, certainly in the public service. So there are going to be cultural hurdles. There'll be grizzled veterans that say, that doesn't work that way, or this doesn't work that way. You're absolutely correct. What we can start to show, though, is, and we have to do this intelligently. We have to pick our pilots correctly, as Keith and Rosanna were saying. We have to pick those very intelligently. And what will happen is, we are ultimately held to a high standard, and that standard is, frankly, our budgets. If people start to see, okay, those guys are using analytics over there, and in the Moneyball, the Oakland A's are starting to win with a much lower salary. Okay, there's got to be something on over there. What's going on over there? So I think that there will always be cultural relics and cultural challenges in the way that you've described it. But the way that we break those down is that we find pilots where there's progressive thinking individuals. We start to show the gains. We start to show the decrease in costs. And we start to turn people based on evidence. And I think that it is no doubt going to be an uphill battle. And we will face those grizzled veterans, as you said. But I think it's certainly a battle we've taken on.
And just, there's the other challenge I think we have is, on one hand, it's really great. Our service managers feel a lot of ownership and pride over the service they request. If you run aquatics, you run arenas, water, parks, whatever. We know a lot about your customers, and you have the data that you need to understand their needs and know that you're doing a good job. But with that also comes a pretty heavy degree of protectionism. I think where I know my customers that have my data, have my systems, and so even asking them to open that up and in light of other service areas can sometimes be a scary thing. So that's also a battle that we kind of.
It becomes a positive change management. As with any other change, right? Not using computers and it's so it's, I think it's being mindful of that as well, and realizing too that employees are our greatest asset. The city, so it's a collaborative analysis approach, and mindful too that I'm building the cases and testing it, what that veteran said, I know it works. Wouldn't that just prove just that, right? So I think it's gotta be a multi-project relationship too. It's a hard project, but start small and see where it takes us.
The other thing, if I just may add, that experience it's not to say that it would ever be sort of cast away. I mean, you know, to present statistics or present data or some level of analysis, without those individuals having a good understanding of the environment in which those statistics came from, is very dangerous. So I think that it's not a discarding of experience. That experience will be essential to interpreting that data, and even more importantly, as we were discussing, translating that data into those management decisions. I mean, certainly I've come across sort of, some analyses, and I've looked at them and thought, okay, there's absolutely no way. And you go back and you find out what the problems are. So there's going to be a bit of a cart and a horse there, and there always should be. The information coming from big data and analytics should push the experience. The experience should also have a level of, there's no possible way that's correct. So I think you see what I'm doing.
We have time for about one more question if anybody else has something you'd like to ask. Well, yeah, Bob.
So when are you gonna synchronize the traffic lights?
Well, let me put it this way, Bob. The Los Angeles project was a 30-year, $400 million project. So that would be, roughly 40% of the entire city's budget. So it will be a while before we synchronize those.
So, you're that well aligned. Thank you very much to all three of you for coming in and for a great and interesting presentation and discussion. And I appreciate
Something like that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.